So I think there's a couple moving parts to that question. I think I do think it is true that this year or this past year, um, some percentage of institutional capital has become spooked by quantum risk. I have really good sources on that from some of the biggest asset managers, institutions in the world, that have, for example, said that, a year ago, 5% of their institutional clients would ask about quantum risk, and then it jumped to over 30%, for example. Um, and institutions are basically saying, well, okay, here's a bull case, a base case, and a bear case for Bitcoin. They say, okay, we'll put quantum in the bear case, and they kind of increase the odds a little bit and say, that just maybe we would have put 3% of our assets into it. Now we'll put 2%, for example. Or, our average price target might have been 200K. Now we'll make it 150K because the bear case, the probability there is just higher. So I do think it has around the margins impacted price. Um, I think the technical risk is overblown in, say, any sort of investable time horizon, 3 to 5 to 7 years. But big capital tends to be kind of forward-looking in that sense. Um, I don't think it's as clean as, like, every year, institutions are gonna, reduce allocations by a certain amount and things like that. And there is a cost to become quantum resilient. So quantum resilient signatures are way more costly than unquantum resilient signatures. They take a lot more storage and bandwidth. So, for example, if every transaction on the Bitcoin network was signed by a quantum resilient signature, you'd have way fewer transactions available per block, which is a trade-off that might have to be explored at some point. I think the biggest issue. So you're right that quantum computing does affect everything we know. Basically, it affects our banks, it affects the internet, it affects every. It's kind of if we wake up tomorrow and someone's got a quantum computer, basically everything is insecure. The main difference is that those are mostly centralized systems. So they can generally update over time when, if and when quantum computing becomes an issue. The issue is that because Bitcoin is rather decentralized, that's both a feature and a bug. It's a feature because it makes it kind of like digital gold, which is that no authority can just come in and say, hey, we're going to create another million coins, or we're gonna go ahead and block these addresses, or all the stuff that we buy Bitcoin for is because it's very hard to govern. But that also means it's hard to come to a consensus on updates. Now, in the past, when something is pretty clear, it has been updated. It takes a rather large consensus. It's an opt-in aspect to update it, and it absolutely can become quantum resilient through updates. But I think the bears would say that because of its decentralized nature, its purposely slow nature, that it's more likely to be slow to update compared to other systems, and therefore capital is going to rotate toward things that are able to update quicker, even at the cost of centralization. I generally disagree with that view, but that's what the bears, I think, would say if I try to steelman their view.
What would the bulls say?
The bulls would say that it's not even clear that in 20 years there will be quantum computers capable of attacking a Bitcoin private key. Um, they will say, when it does become clear, like, for example, when you have, like, we always see, like, like this system factored, a number with Shor's algorithm, but they like preloaded it with the answer. And when you start to see ones where they don't preload it with the answer and it actually works, but basically there's more milestones ahead that we can say it actually looks increasingly likely that there maybe will be a quantum computer capable of attacking Bitcoin and making it insecure in a timeline that matters to us. Um, and there are another thing is that there are BIPs, there are Bitcoin improvement protocols being worked on to explore how Bitcoin would become quantum resilient. The other factor there is the worst thing you could do is do like an upgrade that adds some sort of quantum resilience to Bitcoin, but then a few years later it finds out that that was like a flawed method or a very inefficient method. Because encryption has to be around a while for people to be kind of pretty sure that it's bulletproof, that there's no kind of like roundabout way to solve it in a non-brute force way. The encryption we use now is like very tested. Quantum resilient encryption is, it's like, how much security do you need? What is truly secure? Has it been battle tested enough? Is this the most efficient way to do it? I mentioned before, for example, it does dramatically increase the signature sizes, which is a pretty big cost on a very low bandwidth, low storage system like Bitcoin that has, a hard limit on block sizes and things like that. And so if you rush to get it quantum resilient, but then 3 years later someone says, well, actually, here's a way to do it slightly more secure for half the data storage, then you messed up. You rushed an upgrade before it was made sense. But I think the bulls would say quantum computers capable of attacking Bitcoin are a long way off, and there are upgrade paths that are being worked on that'll be done if and when that's ever needed.